All right. Good morning. Namaste, everyone. So let's start our Ramayana reading. Page number 519. And we are starting the Uttara. We finished the Yudh Kand last week. So in Ram's sabha. So he is a king now, and this is his sabha. When Ram was crowned king in Ayodhya, the rishis of the four quarters came to bless him. Kaushik, Yavkrit, Gargye, Gadhav, Kanva, and Muni, Medathi his son. All these holy ones who dwelt in the east came to the sabha of the house of the sun. From the west came Narisangu, Kavasa, Dhaumya, and Koshe. From the south came Swatsetre, Namuchi, Pramuchi, Agastya, Sumukh, and Vimukh. From the north and with their disciples came Vashisht, Kashyap, Vishwamitra, Atri, Gautam, Jamadagni, and Bharadwaj, 7 sages. Led by Agastya, the rishis were announced and led into the Ram's Sabha. They were radiant as the rising sun, and Ram offered them Padya and Arghya. See, Padya is the water offered to wash the feet, and Arghya is the water offered for the mouth. Soon they were seated in his ancient court on darbasans covered in deer skin. One of the wise said, "We have heard about your great exploit in Lanka, Ram. We are amazed that Lakshman and you could kill Ravan's son, Indrajit." In mild surprise, Ram asked, "Munis, does it surprise you more that we killed Indrajit than that we killed his father Ravan and his uncle Kumbhakarna? Why, my lords?" With a smile, Agastya said, "Indrajit was invincible. But Ram, perhaps you do not know very much about that Rakshas prince or even his father. Let me tell you about their clan. It was in the Krit Yuga, an age ago. See, Krit is another name for Satyuga. An age ago that the Muni Pulastya lived in the world. He was Brahma's son and resembled the Pitamaha in every quality. All the gods blessed Pulastya, and he came to Mount Meru, to an ashram that belonged to King Trinabindu, upon the slopes of the Golden Mountain, and dwelt there in tapasya for an age. But the Raj Rishi Trinbindu, Trinbindu's ashram was like a bit of heaven fallen into the world. Unearthly trees grew here, and there were lakes and pools whose water was like Amrit. So it was that the daughters of rishis and Nagins, Gandharvis, Kinnaris, and Apsaras came to bathe, sing, and frolic in the enchanted hermitage. The young women disturbed Pulastya's dhyan, and he said in anger, "Let any woman whom my eyes see here become pregnant." And in fear, the Apsaras, Kinnaris, Gandharvis, Rishi's daughters, and the other young women no longer visited that ashram. But King Trinbindu's daughter did not hear about Pulastya's curse. She arrived in her father's sanctuary on a clear morning in spring, and she heard the Vedas being chanted sonorously in a voice more fine and reverent than any she had ever heard. Innocently, the princess came and stood before the godlike rishi she saw sitting under an unworldly Nyagrod tree. Pulastya's angry gaze fell upon Trinbindu's exquisite daughter, and at once she felt the strangest sensation in her loins and her belly. She turned as pale as a Lodhra flower and ran in fear from the sage under his tree. The princess came trembling before her father, and he asked her, "What happened to you, my child?" Tears in her eyes, she said, "I don't know what happened to me, father. But I wandered into Pulastya Muni's ashram, and when he looked at me, I felt my body change, even as if it was not my own anymore." Trinbindu lapsed into dhyan, and in his meditation he saw what had happened. He learned of Pulastya's curse, taking his daughter with him. he went to the Rishi's ashram. He said to Brahma's son, Lord, I have brought my daughter to you. She will serve you faithfully and look after your every need. Pulasthe, who saw clearly through time, knew it was destined that the princess should remain with him. He looked at her for just a moment before he said to Trinbindhu, Leave her with me. Thus King Trinbindhu's daughter became the Muni Pulasthe's wife. She looked after him so lovingly that one day soon the Rishi said to her, You are a good wife, and I am pleased with you. You shall be the mother of my son. And in time she gave birth to a truly brilliant child. Since she had listened every day to her husband chanting the Veda when she was pregnant, their boy was named Vishrasva. He was a remarkable boy, knowing and gentle even when he was young, and compassionate to every living creature. Vishrasva learned the Veda from his father, and quickly he also became a master of tapasya. He was pure and restrained, above every temptation of the flesh. And the great Bhardwaj gave his daughter Devarnini, who was as lovely as any Apsara, to be Vishrasva's wife. Vishrasva fathered a splendid son on Devarnini, and that boy resembled his father so much the rishis of the Devlok named him Vaishravan. Vaishravan went into a tapovan and sat in dhyan in that forest, heart like a flame upon the earth. He grew like a sacred fire fed with ghee. For 1,000 years he sat in unflinching penance. He began by living on just water, then on only the air he breathed, and finally he did not respire anymore, but was perfectly quiescent. The 1,000 years passed like a single one. At the end of 1,000 years, Brahma himself and Indra and his devas appeared before Vaishravan. The Pitamaha asked his great grandson, My child, tell me what boon you want from me. You can have anything. Vaishravan said, Lord, make me a guardian of the world, a Lokpal, and let me a protector of the earth, a Lok Rakshak. Brahma said, I was about to create the fourth Lokpal, so now you be that guardian. Be the lord of wealth, be an equal to Indra, Varuna, and Yama. So this Vaishravan is another name for Kuber. So this is Kuber. Okay. The creator raised his hands in a mystic mudra, and suddenly the most wonderful ship of the sky appeared above him, quiet as flowers, bright as the sun, quick as light. Brahma said to Vaishravana, This is the Pushpak Viman. From now on, you shall travel in it wherever you wish to go. Raising their hands over the kneeling Vaishravan, Brahma and the Devas vanished from the forest of his tapasya. Just then, Vishrasva arrived there to bless his son. Vaishravan said to his father, Brahma has made me a Lokpal. He has given me this marvelous Viman, but he has not told me where I will live. You tell me where I can dwell without harming any living creature. Vaishrasva said 100 yojans out on the southern ocean, and to the east of Bharatvarsh, there is a mountain called Trikut. Upon its summit is a splendid city called Lanka. Vishwakarman created Lanka for the race of Rakshasas to live in, just as he made Amravati for the Devas. Lanka has battlements of gold and silver moats around it. Its portals are encrusted with precious cat's eyes. Long ago, the Rakshasas fled Lanka for fear of Vishnu, and the city lies empty. You can live in Lanka, my son, without harming any of the living. And so, Vaishravan, the pious lord of treasures, began living in the deserted city of Lanka, upon the jade island of that name. Such was his dharma that he shone like another sun on the earth. Soon, drawn by his grace, a race of unearthly beings, the Nerirathas, came to Lanka and they became a Vaishravan's people. His fame and his cities spread through the world like the scent of flowers upon the wind. Lanka was a focus of fortune on earth. Its master journeyed wherever he pleased through the three realms in his Pushpak Viman. Most of all, he went frequently to visit his mother and his father in their ashram in Bharatvarsh, said Agastya Muni in Ram's court. Okay. So the race of Rakshasas. Ram seemed surprised by what Agastya said. He asked, "My lord, I had heard the race of Rakshasas was descended from Pulaste, but now you say the Rakshasas lived in Lanka before Vishravan went there. Were those Rakshasas as powerful as Ravana and his clan? Who was their ancestor, Muni? Why did Vishnu drive them out from Lanka?" Agastya replied, "In the beginning, Prajapati was born of the first waters of the origin. In the lotus sprung from Vishnu's navel. He entered the sacred waters and created the first creatures in them. Those great creatures were savaged by hunger and thirst, and they came howling to their creator. They cried, 'We are in pain. What shall we do?' Laughing, Prajapati said to them, 'You must protect the waters with your very lives.' Some of his creatures said, 'We shall.' Others cried, 'We must eat.' Prajapati said to those who would be protectors, 'You shall be called Rakshasas.' To those who would eat, he said, 'You shall be called Yakshas.' Among the leaders of the Rakshasas were two mighty brothers, Heti and Paheti, who lived at the same time as the dreadful Madhu and Ketab. Heti was a pious Rakshas, and he went into Tapovan and sat in tapasya. Heti wanted a wife. He was married to Yam's sister, Bhai, whose very name meant fear. Heti fathered a son called Vidyutkesh. Vidyutkesh grew like a lotus in the holy and original waters. When he was full grown, Heti had him married to Sandhya Devi's daughter, Salkantan, and Vidyutkesh enjoyed his bride as Indra does Palomi. She conceived and climbed Mount Mandra to give birth. Just as Ganga brought forth the Lord Kartikeya, when Agni left Shiva's seed in her water, Salaktankat delivered a powerful child on the mountain. But she was so eager to make love again with her husband after a long pregnancy that she abandoned the child and returned to Vidyutkesh. The child, bright as the autumn sun, put his hand into his mouth and cried softly. That sound was like the rumbling of the thunderheads of the dissolution. It happened that Shiva and Parvati were passing in the sky at that moment, riding on a Nandishwar. Parvati heard the abandoned Rakshas child, Sukesh, crying. She was so moved, she made him full grown in a moment and immortal as well. Uma also blessed all Rakshas women with a boon that the children shall be born as soon as they are conceived, so they would not be deprived of even a day's love making, which they are so addicted to. Also, Parvati blessed the race of Rakshasas that all their children shall be full grown as soon as they are born. Then Shiva also blessed the demon Sukesh with untold wealth, and he gave him a luminous city to live in, a city that flew through the air and went anywhere at the Rakshas's wish. Sukesh flew through all the worlds in his city, and he became arrogant because of the boons he had. Yet he was not without the dharam that flowed in his very blood from his pious sires. When Gramani, the Gandharva, saw Sukesh with his wealth and his city of the air, he gave his daughter Devvati to that Rakshas to be his wife. The lovely Gandharvi was as pleased as a pauper who finds a treasure, and the Rakshas was as delighted as an elephant in a must that finds a mate. Sukesh sired three sons on Devvati, Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali. They were as brilliant as the three fires of sacrifice, as steadfast as the three worlds, as powerful as the three Vedas, and as dreadful as the three diseases that afflict the body. Those boys knew their father had his boons from the Lord Shiva by his dhyan. Those three young Rakshasas climbed Mount Meru and began a tapasya that terrified all the created. When their penance threatened to ignite the very earth, the Lord Brahma appeared before the Rakshasas in a Viman and said, I have come to bless you with the boons you want. The Rakshasas, whose bodies shook from their long privations, answered him, Lord, let us be long lived, invincible, and may we all love one another. Brahma granted them those boons and vanished from the sky like wealth won in a dream. Delivered from fear now, the demon brothers went where they liked and did as they pleased. An immense army of Rakshasas followed them through the three realms. They had their way with every kingdom they came upon. None could resist them, and all creation went in fear of them. Finally, when they grew tired of their conquests, they came to Vishwakarma, the divine builder, and said, Master of edifices, build us a home as magnificent as Indra's or Shiva's. Vishwakarma said to them, in the southern sea, upon the island of Lanka, there is a mountain called Trikut. Beside Trikut is another mountain, Suvela. On Trikut's central peak is a fortress city that seems to float on air. Once I built that city at Indra's behest. Its walls are so smooth, only the birds of the air can come into Lanka. Rakshasas, you are the masters of your race, even as Indra is the lord of the Devas. As Indra lives in Amravati and his people, you may dwell in Lanka from now. And no enemy will reach you in that impregnable city, for its deep moats and its walls like glass. Thus, Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali went to Lanka with their people. And when they saw the unearthly city, its streets paved with precious Vedure, its mansions built of solid gold, they did not hesitate to make it their home. In that same time, there lived a Gandharvi called Narmada, and she had three daughters. Narmada knew Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali had Gandharv blood in them. Through their own mother, she knew they were masters of the earth by the boons Brahma had granted them. On a day when the Uttara Faguni Nakshatra was plain in the sky, she gave her three daughters to the Rakshasas to be their wives. As the Gandharvas of the air do with the Apsaras of Devlok, the young demons made love with their enchanting brides. Malyavan's wife was called Sundari, and she was as beautiful as her name proclaimed. He gave her a brood of fierce and handsome sons, Vajramusti, Virupaksha, Yagnakop, Dhurmukh, Suptghan, Mata, and Unmata. He also gave her a beautiful daughter, Anal. Sumali's wife, Ketumati, was lovely as a full moon and dearer to her husband than his life. Their sons were called Prahast, Akampan, Vikat, Kalikum, Dhrumraksh, Dand, Suparshva, Praghas, and Bhashkarna. Their daughters were Rak, Pushpokat, Kakasi, and Kumbhnasi. Mali's lotus-eyed wife, Vishuddha, the Gandharvi, born him two daughters, Anal and Anil, and two sons, Har and Sampati. The boys became Vibhishan's ministers. And I'm sure now some of these names we are familiar with because we have heard about them previously. With Brahma's boon and sons as mighty as they had, Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali soon conquered the Devas, the Rishis, the Nags, and the Yakshas. They ranged the worlds like the wind, and they ruined every yajna they found and killed the Rishis who performed them. Their hubris and savagery grew with their power, and the terrified Devas came to Shiva, the unborn, the god of gods, and cried, Mahadev, Sukesha's sons are the bane of the worlds. We have no sanctuary anywhere in creation. They come to Amravati when they please, drive us from our homes, and cry that they are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, that they are Indra, Som, Surya, Vayu, Yam, Agni, and Varun. We beg you, Lord, kill the Rakshasas for our sake. There's no peace left in creation. But Sukesh was Shiva's Bhagat. Shankar said to the Devas, the Rakshasas' death is not written at my hands. Go to Narayan. He will find a way to rid you of them. The Devas flew to Vaikuntha, to the home of the blue god who lies upon the sea of eternity. Piteously they said to him, Vishnu, save us. Sukesha's sons have Brahma's boon and they torment us as they like. We beg you, cut open the Rakshasas' faces with your chakra. Give them as a gift to Yam. Melt the fear from our hearts, Lord, even as the sun does the frost upon the mountains. Slowly Vishnu said, yes, I know Sukesh has Shiva's bones, and I know his sons have Brahma's blessing. I will kill them all for you, Devas. Be at peace. When Malyavan heard what Vishnu had promised the Devas, he called his brothers and said, the slayer of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, Namuchi, Kalnemi, and Samrad, Radhe, the Mayavi, the just Yamal, Arjun, Hardikye, Sumbh and Nishumbh, and 1,000 other great Asurs and Rakshasas, has said he will kill us as well. We resist the terrible Vishnu? How will we resist the terrible Vishnu? Sumali and Mali said to their brother, their king, we have imbibed the Vedas. We have been just rulers to our people. We have observed our Rakshas Dharam and we have no enmity with Vishnu. It is the craven Devas who have poisoned Narayan's mind against us. It is for their sake he has sworn to kill us. Let us kill the Devas and remove the very cause of Vishnu's anger toward us. A vast Rakshas army was mustered with awesome commanders like Jamb and Virat, and the demons prepared for war, riding in vimans and chariots, on elephants, horses big as elephants that trod air, sorcerous mules, bulls, camels, dolphins, serpents, crocodiles, tortoises, fish, swarms of great birds, vultures, eagles, and ravens, big as Garuda, lions, tigers, panthers, boars, bears, and deer called Shirimar and Chamar, and teeming demon army gathered in Lanka. Then with the legions of millions, the Rakshasas set out to kill Indra's Devas by earth, sea, and air. Dreadful omens appeared everywhere. Clouds formed suddenly in a clear sky, rained down pale bones and steaming blood. Jackal packs swarmed around the Rakshas legions and howled dismally. An uncanny ring of vultures wheeled above and breathed fire through their hooked beaks. All the creatures of the earth seemed disturbed, and the shrieks of 1,000 races of birds rent the air, as did elephant herds terrified, trumpeting, and jungles of great cats roared their anxiety above the sounds that every other living beast made. It seemed the very element, the Panchbhut, would dissolve and the worlds would be undone. Scarlet-footed pigeons and vivid minas darted above the Rakshasas in frenzy. But the Rakshasas were the sovereigns of the three worlds. They were swollen with the pride of their conquests, their wealth, and their power. They paid no mind to the omens that would have moved a blind and deaf man to fear for his life. The demon army rode on, and Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali at its head were like the three flames of the apocalypse, and the rest relied on these three as the Devas do upon the Trimurti. The Rakshasas streamed on toward the Deva city. Vishnu saw them and he filled his twin quivers with arrows, mounted Garuda, and flew down to fight. He was as bright as 100 suns, his armor gleaming, and Panchjanya and the Sudarshan, the Shiring and the Kaumudaki glittering in his four dark hands. He wore a shining garland, like a wrap of lightning across his body, blue as a thunderhead. Some legions of the Rakshas army were blown away by the wind, stirred by Garud's wings. The golden eagle was like a flying mountain. Then, roaring, the Rakshasas rallied. They surrounded Vishnu and assailed him with every manner of ayudh and astra. Locusts fly into a paddy field, bees into a jar of honey, moths into a great flame, crocodiles into the sea, and the worlds themselves into Mahavishnu. At the dissolution, the demon's arrow swarms flew into blue Narayan. They struck him. They even drew blood, but they did not harm the blue one. Then he drew back his own bowstring and loosed a tide of arrows at the Rakshasas. Narayan's cloud banks of arrows, his streams, his rillets, his rivers of arrows cut down the demons in thousands, in hundreds of thousands, in an eye flash, in a wink. Blood too flowed in waves, in frothing brooks, in rivulets, in a sea at Purushottam's cosmic archery. Vishnu raised his sea conch and blew a blast on it deep as the sky. The Rakshasas' mounts turned tail in absolute terror. The greatest demons were struck by his impossible volleys and fell like mountains riven by thunderbolts. Blood flowed from their wounds like the red cataracts of the monsoon flashing down the Himalaya. But the god did not tire. He reveled in his yajna of death. He severed their necks, smashed their banners, their chariot wheels, their bows, their limbs, stopped their screams. Like rays from the sun, waves from the sea, serpents from a mountain, rain from a cloud, his arrows flowed in torrents from his miraculous shearing. The Rakshasas fled from the dreadful hurry, like lions from the sarab, like elephants from a hunting lion, like leopards from a tiger, like dogs from a leopard, like cats from a dog, like rats from a snake. They fled down to earth, back to Lanka. Vishnu flew after them. Then Sumali covered Vishnu in a drifting mist of arrows. He rode up to the blue god and roared at him, waving his arm above his head, even as an elephant waves his trunk. With a smile, Janardhan severed the head of Sumali's Sarthi. The Rakshas's horses bolted. Now Mali charged Vishnu as the birds of dusk, streaked with the last rays of the day, fly into the caves of the Gronchial. Mali's gold-tipped arrows flew into the blue one's darkling body, thousands of shafts. Vishnu aimed his own volleys at Mali, and they drank the demon's blood thirstily as serpents drink nectar. Vishnu cut down Mali's banner, smashed his bow in his hand, shattered his chariot, and killed his horses. Leaping down with a fulminant roar, the Rakshas struck Garud on his golden head with his mace, even as Yam once struck Shiva. The eagle quivered. He spun around in pain and turned his back on the battle. Thinking for a moment that Vishnu had turned to flee, the Rakshas army roared its delight like a sea at night when the moon is full. Even with his back turned, Vishnu cast the Sudarshan Chakra at Mali. Time's wheel blinding as the sun, the disc cut Mali's head from his throat and it fell on the ground, spouting blood even as Rahu's head did when Mohini gave the Devas all the Amrit to drink. Above, the sky erupted in peals of thunder and fatal rain fell down from Devlok as Indra and his people were swept by joy. Roaring like 10 prides of lions to see their brother killed, Malyavan and Sumali fled. They fled back into their city with the remains of their legions. Even as they went, Garud recovered and began to flap his wings again. So thousands of Rakshasas were blown into the sea. Some had their soft, handsome faces cut in two by the wheeling, ubiquitous chakra. Some had their chests crushed by a blow from the Kaumudaki. Some were dissected by arrows like bolts of lightning from the syringe. Demon and tails floated like garlands upon the crimsoned waves. Like clouds driven by Vayu, the Rakshasas fled from the terrible Vishnu, and he slaughtered them all around him, and they lay in death's final postures like blue mountains. Seeing the massacre of his people, Malyavan came back to fight as waves do to the sea after briefly touching the shore. His eyes bloodshot, his great body shaking, the king of the Rakshasas cried to Vishnu, Padmanabh, is this dharma? That you continue to kill my people when they have abandoned all thought of war? They flee before you, and yet you hunt them like animals. You will not find a heaven for yourself with this murdering. If you must fight Narayan, here I am before you. Fight me if you dare. Vishnu said softly, and his voice drowned every other noise of land, sea, and air. I must keep the word I have given the Devas that I will exterminate your race. I will sacrifice Swarag to keep my word. With a growl, Malyavan cast a Shakti at the Lord, striking him squarely in his deep blue chest. It glittered there like a streak of lightning across a cloud. Smiling, Vishnu drew out that Shakti and flung it back to the Rakshas. It struck his jeweled chest as a thunderbolt might a mountain. Malyavan fell in a swoon, but he rose at once and rushed at Vishnu and struck both him and Garud blows like thunderclaps with a fist clenched around an iron band studded with long, sharp spikes. Garud flapped his wings and blew the demon back into the city of Lanka and his brother Sumali and his allegiance with him. With that, somehow the Rakshas's spirit was broken. They knew they could not stand before Blue Narayan. The demons fled with all their people down below the earth into deep, glimmering patal, where their kind belonged, Agastya said in Ram's sabha. So next chapter is the birth of Ravana. Ram said to Agastya, Muni, tell us how Ravana was born. The Maharishi resumed, Sumali wandered the Patals for an age. When his terror of Vishnu receded, he rose to the surface of the earth again and ranged the sea-girt world of humans for another age. One day he saw the splendid Vaishravana flying above him in the Pushpak Viman. On his way to see his father, Vaishravan had come to Lanka and lived there with his Nerits. Sumali said to his daughter, Kakasi, my child, you are a young woman now, and it is time you were given in marriage. Remember, the honor of 3 families rests in the hands of a daughter, that of her father's clan, her mother's, and her husband's as well. See that you preserve all 3, my Kakasi. She asked, Father, to whom do you mean to give me? To the Muni Vaishrasva, so you will have sons as splendid as a Surya Dev. Kakasi bore to her father, and she took herself to the Tapovan, where Vaishrasva was performing Agnihotra. The young Rakshasi did not know that it was an inauspicious time to approach the Rishi. She came and stood near him with folded hands while he was absorbed in the ritual. She stood staring down at her feet, bashfully, and scratched the ground with her toe to attract his attention. Vishrasva looked up from his puja and saw a young girl standing near him, her face like the full moon. He said slowly, Who are you? Whose daughter? And why have you come to my ashram? Brahm Rishi, I am Kakasi. I have come because my father Sumali told me to. I beg you, divine the rest for yourself. Vaishrasva sank into dhyan. Then emerging from his trance, he said, I see why you have come to me. You have come to have sons by me, but you have come at the wrong Mahurat. So, O woman, with the gait of a she-elephant in a rut, you will have savage Rakshasas for sons. Brahmavadi, I beg you, let not all my sons be like that. The Rishi paused a moment. His face softened and he said, Young woman, your last son shall be a man of dharma, like all the Rakshasas of our clan. Then the Muni took Kakasi unto himself and gave her children. Kakasi was first delivered of a dreadful infant with the 10 heads in a cone, with great fangs in them. His hair was like strands of fire. His lips were coppery like his eyes. When he was born, all the fell creatures of night gathered around that ashram, and they circled his mother from left to right in a bizarre and ominous ritual. Airy clouds scudded into the sky and rained down showers of blood. Flaming meteors, thousands of them fell onto the earth, making great craters and hissing into the sea, so the waves stood up like mountains and smashed against the shore. The very earth was agitated, as if with some terrible fear, and strayed from her true orbit. Cacus's first child was born roaring fiercely from all his 10 heads, and his father named him Dasagriva. Soon after, Sumali's daughter had another son, and he was the biggest baby ever born. His ears were like great jars, so he was called Kumbhakaran. Next, Kakasi gave birth to a perfectly hideous daughter, and she was Shurpnakha. Last of all, a serene and handsome infant was born to the Rakshasi, and he was called Vibhishan. He was hardly like a Rakshas by his appearance or his nature, and soft flowers fell out of Devlok to bless his birth. Those children grew up in the forest where Vaishrasva lived in Dhyan. From the first, Dasagriva and Kumbhakarna had restless, lustful natures, and they spent their days in satisfying their every appetite. They hunted for sport and for food, and when they were a little older, they did not hesitate to slake themselves on any woman of any race whose path crossed theirs in the forest. Vibhishan was a restrained, wise youth from the first. He spent his time at study and serving his father. Dasagriva also gave some of his time to studying the Vedas and other ancient revelations, and to his own father's surprise, that wild and ferocious Rakshas outstripped his brother Vibhishan easily at learning. But while Vibhishan lived by what he learned from the Shastras, Dasagriva did not. One day, Vaishravan, who is also called Kuber, the lord of the 9 treasures, arrived in his Viman to visit his father. So that's how you see that Kuber and Ravana and his siblings, they are related, same father, different mothers, same father. Okay. Kakasi called her eldest son and showed him how lustrous and fortunate his half-brother was. She said, "Look at his Viman, how it shines. He flies anywhere he likes in it. And he is a Lokpal, the master of all the wealth in the world. My son, I want you to be Vaishravan's equal. That is what your mother wants for you." It's like a competition between 2 half-brothers. Dasagriva was thoughtful for a moment. He stared long and hard at Kuber's Pushpak Viman. He pursed his lips and said quietly, "I will be more powerful than Kuber. He is the lord of but 1/4 of the earth. I will rule the 3 worlds." His mother embraced him fervidly. She kissed all his 10 heads, which appeared and vanished uncannily around his central face. So it was that Dasagriva first decided to sit in tapasya. He went with his brothers to an ashram at sacred Gokaran and began his intense penance. And once he set his heart to it, the Rakshas tapasya was past compare. It was his ancestor Brahma whom Dasagriva worshipped. I think we have time for another short chapter. Dasagriva's tapasya. Ram asked Agastya, "Tell me about Dasagriva's tapasya, Muni, and his brothers." The rishi said, "Their penance lasted an age, and each of the brothers had his own method. Kumbhakaran stood amidst 4 fires in searing summer, and the 5th was the blazing sun above, until the skin peeled from his body. He never flinched. During the monsoon, he knelt on the ground often in the middle of a river, while the rain and the floods swept over him ceaselessly, and he was truly wet to his bones. In winter, too, he stood on, never stirring in icy water for 10,000 years. Kumbhakaran performed tapasya. The gentle Vibhishan stood on one leg for 5,000 years, even like Dharam in the Kali Yuga. At the end of his penance, Apsaras danced on clouds, and fine showers of unearthly petals fell on the good Rakshas. Vibhishan spent another 5,000 years imbibing the Vedas until he knew them backward. He recited them while he stood with his face and his arms raised heavenward and stared at the sun, the stars and the moon, never blinking, never looking down. And this Rakshas experienced only delight during all his 10,000 years of tapasya, as if he were in the Lord Indra's Nandan. Dasagriva, the eldest, went without food for 10,000 years, and at the end of every 1,000 years, he offered one of his heads into one of the 4 fires he had lit around himself. Thus 9,000 years passed, and finally the Rakshas was about to offer his 10th head and his life to the flames when Brahma appeared before him like a sea of grace with all the devas around him. Dasagriva, said the Pitamaha, a tapasya like yours must be fruitful. Never has this earth seen such a penance. Ask me for any boon, Rakshas, and it shall be yours. Dasagriva bowed solemnly before the four-faced creator of the universe. He said, Pitamaha, the root of all life's fear is death. Make me immortal, so I shall never be afraid. Brahma said, smiling, immortality is not mine to give. I'm not immortal myself. Ask me for anything else, something I can give you. Dasagriva thought for no more than a moment, then said, let me not die at the hands of any of the greater races of heaven or earth. Let no Supan, Nag, Yaksh, Daitya, Danav, Rakshas, Dev, Gandharv, Kinnar, Charan, Siddh, Rishi Muni, or predator of the wild kill me. As for mortal men, puny humans, I have no fear of them. They are like straw. Brahma said thoughtfully, knowing where this boon would take the Rakshas, so be it then. And I grant you another boon, that your 9 heads, which you offered me in the fire, shall be restored to you. And Rakshas, you will have the power to assume any form you choose. There are some who say that the Rakshas offered his heads not to Brahma, but to Shiva. Both versions are true for different kalps. Brahma now turned to the good Vibhishan. I am pleased with your tapasya as well, Vibhishan. What boon would you have from me? Vibhishan said, Lord, my life's purpose is already fulfilled, and I am a kritkritya, that I see you before me. But if you are pleased with me, grant me that my mind remains steadfast and virtuous in the midst of the life's greatest trials. Grant me that the knowledge of the Brahmastra dawns on me of itself. May every thought that enters my mind during every stage of my life be of dharam. Let me fulfill my dharam, however hard it is. For if a man has dharam, he has everything. And Brahma said to him, though you are born a Rakshasa, your nature is like a Maharishi's. Noble Vibhishan, I bless you that you will be a Chiranjeevi. You will live as long as the earth. Brahma turned to Kumbhakaran, but the Devas cried, Lord, you must not grant him any boon. All the worlds already live in terror of him. You know he came to the Nandan and devoured 7 Apsaras and 3 of Indra's servitors. There is no count of the rishis and men he has eaten. Pitamaha, instead of a boon, cast a spell over him, that the worlds may be safe. But Kumbhakaran's tapasya had been as compelling as his brothers, and Brahmas had to grant him a boon. With a thought, the Creator summoned the Devi Saraswati. When she stood shimmering before him, he said softly to her, Goddess of the Word, be the speech on Kumbhakaran's tongue. When she had subtly entered the giant Rakshas's mouth, Brahma turned to him and said, Kumbhakaran, I am pleased with your tapasya. Ask me for any boon you want. Saraswati spoke from the demon's mouth, Lord, Let me sleep for years and years. Smiling to see the startled look on the giant's face, Brahma said, so be it, and vanished from there with the devas. When Sumali heard of the boons that Dasagriva had from Brahma, he rose from the Patals with Marich and Parhasta, Virupaksha and Mahodra, and a host of other Rakshasas. Sumali embraced his grandson and cried, not even Vishnu can harm us anymore. Vaishravan lives in Lanka, but Lanka rightfully belongs to you. Dasagriva, you shall be the lord of all the Rakshasas, and our race will be restored to glory under you. Dasagriva said, Kuber is my older brother. We should not speak of him like this. But his dreadful eyes shone with very different thoughts. Reading his heart clearly, Parhast said, among kings there is no brotherly love. Listen to what I have to tell you, Dasagriva. The Devis Diti and Aditi are sisters, and they are both Kashyap, Prajapati's wives. Aditi bore the great Muni, the Devas of day and night, and lords of the worlds, and Aditi bore him the Daityas of night and darkness. Indeed, the Daityas were Kashyap's firstborn sons, and once all this earth, full of mountains, seas, rivers, and forests, belonged to the sons of Aditi, they were the masters of the world. If it was Vishnu who helped the Devas usurp the power of the Asuras and Rakshas, that was long ago in another yuga. But now you are the first of our kind who has a boon like the one Brahma has given you, that you shall be invincible to all the immortal races of heaven and earth. Yours, Dasagriva, must be an unrivaled destiny in the history of our people. You must not forsake that destiny, but seize it with both hands. Dasagriva did not think long before he said simply, I shall. The same day, with a legion of Rakshasas who had pledged allegiance to him, Dasagriva arrived on Lanka and Mount Trikut. From there he sent Prahast as his messenger to Kuber, Lokpal, master of wealth. Prahast brought a courteous message to Vaishravana from Dasagriva. Lord of treasures, O my half-brother, the city of Lanka belongs of old to the Rakshasas of my clan. Malyavan, Mali, and Sumali ruled Lanka. I am Sumali's grandson. I beg you, leave our city now, for I, Dasagriva, mean to be a king of our people here. Parhast brought his new savant's message to Kuber's court. Kuber welcomed the messenger with every courtesy, and when he had listened to the Rakshas's message, he sent a reply through him. Dasagriva, this Lanka was given to me by my father, and I have peopled her with my Neriths, whom I brought here with the generous gifts of gold and homes. You are my brother, and you are welcome to come to live in Lanka and to share its bounty with me. While Parhasta took this message back to Dasagriva, Vaishravan flew to his father. Vaishrav's in his Pushpak Viman, he said, Father, Dasagriva sent me a message through Parhasta asking me to leave Lanka because he means to be a king in our city and a king of the Rakshasas of the world. I replied asking him to live with me in Lanka, to share the wealth of Lanka with me, but I'm not sure how he will receive my offer. Vaishrava's heart misgave him. He said, frowning, he is an evil child, your half-brother, both by his birth and now by the boons he has from Brahma. He will never agree to share Lanka with you. My advice to you is leave Lanka and go to Kailash with your people. The Mandakini flows beside Kailash. Golden lotuses that shine like the sun float upon her waters. Lotuses as blue as Vishnu's eyelids and those as white as moon beams. Devas, Apsaras, Gandharvas, Nags, and Kinnars come to sing and dance and make love beside the Mandakini. I fear that with his boon, Dasagriva is so powerful that you must not make an enemy of him. Yes, my son, I am certain the best course is for you to leave Lanka with your Neriths and make yourself a home near Kailash. And so Kuber did. He founded the secret city of Alka to the north of the Himalaya, and its marvelous pleasure garden, the Chaitre, which rivaled Indra's Nandan in Amravati. And with the Lord Shiva's blessing, he was happy there. Meanwhile, Parhasta heard that Vaishravan had abandoned Lanka, and he came excitedly to Dasagriva, shouting, "He has left Lanka. Vaishravan has left Lanka for you to rule." Dasagriva embraced him and roared, "You, my friend, shall be my chief minister in our city." And indeed, Dasagriva and Parhasta have been as close as brothers ever since. So the enemy of the Devas, Dasagriva, entered the magnificent city of his mother's people. He was crowned king of Lanka, king of the Rakshasas, and his people flocked to him from across the earth and swarmed up to him before the deepest patals to the city of their fortune, to their invincible sovereign of night, said Agastya Muni. So let's stop it here, and then we'll see how Ravana marries and what happens after that. So all this is being told by Muni Agastya to Rama in Ayodhya in that sabha. Okay. So let's look at the Hindi titles also from Valmiki's Ramayana.
Harshji, what is narrators?
Nariti means the consorts, like a women. Okay. So that's another name for his women. So with the help of those women, he produced the population over there. So narrator.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So श्री राम के दरबार में महर्षियों का आगमन, उनके साथ उनकी बातचीत तथा श्री राम के प्रश्न। महर्षि अगस्त्य के द्वारा पुलस्त्य के गुण और तपस्या का वर्णन तथा उनसे विश्रवा मुनि की उत्पत्ति का कथन। विश्रवा से वैश्रवन कुबेर की उत्पत्ति, उनकी तपस्या, वर प्राप्ति तथा लंका में निवास। राक्षस वंश का वर्णन, हेति, विद्युतकेश एंड सुकेश की उत्पत्ति। सुकेश के पुत्र माल्यवान, सुमाली और माली के संतानों का वर्णन। देवताओं का भगवान शंकर की सलाह से राक्षसों के वध के लिए भगवान विष्णु की शरण में जाना और उनसे आश्वासन पाकर लौटना, राक्षसों का देवताओं पर आक्रमण और भगवान विष्णु का उनकी सहायता के लिए आना। भगवान विष्णु द्वारा राक्षसों का संहार और पलायन। माल्यवान का युद्ध और पराजय तथा सुमाली आदि सब राक्षसों का रसातल में प्रवेश। रावण आदि का जन्म और उनका तप के लिए गोकर्ण आश्रम में जाना। रावण आदि की तपस्या और वर प्राप्ति। रावण का संदेश सुनकर पिता की आज्ञा से कुबेर का लंका को छोड़कर कैलाश पर जाना, लंका में रावण का राज्याभिषेक तथा राक्षसों का निवास। So we read up to this point. Okay. So any question, comment? Otherwise, if Padmini is there, she can, we would like if she can sing a bhajan for us.
Namaste, Hershi.
Namaste.